If I win, you look at the evidence. You clear my mother's name.
Sit down, son. You don't belong here.
Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for being here, and God bless you.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A Tuesday in March. The kind of morning that starts like every other morning. Buses running their routes. Coffee brewing in 1,000 break rooms. People sitting at desks they have sat at for years. Nobody thinking that today might be the last time. Sandra Weber had cleaned the executive floor at Aldrich Industries for 9 years. She was not on salary. She was contract labor through a staffing agency. No benefits, no health insurance, no retirement. No name on a door. She had a badge that said cleaning staff, and a locker in the basement that smelled like bleach and industrial soap. She arrived every morning at 4:30. She left before the executives came in at 8. That was the deal. Invisible labor. You clean the glass and polish the marble and empty the wastebaskets and vacuum the carpet. You are gone before the people who matter arrive. You are a ghost with a mop. She earned $11.60 an hour. She and Ethan lived in a rusted sedan parked behind a laundromat on Braddock Avenue in Greenfield. They had been living in that car for 7 months, since the eviction. The car had a blanket in the back seat and a thermos Sandra filled with hot water at the gas station every night so Ethan could have instant oatmeal in the morning before school. That is important to understand, because what happened next only works if the person being framed is someone nobody will fight for. On that Tuesday, 2 detectives walked into the building at 6:15 in the morning. They found Sandra on the 42nd floor, on her knees, scrubbing the baseboard outside the CFO's office. They told her to stand up. She stood. They told her to put her hands behind her back. She put her hands behind her back. They handcuffed her in the hallway. They walked her through the lobby, past the security desk, where the night guard had said good morning to her every day for 9 years. Past the reception area where the brass letters spelled Aldrich Industries in type 3 feet tall, past the glass doors and into the parking lot and into the back of an unmarked sedan. Not one person said a word. "I didn't take anything," Sandra said in the car. "I've never taken anything." The detective in the passenger seat wrote it down. He wrote it the way you write down something you do not plan to look at again. The charge was felony grand larceny. A diamond necklace valued at $280,000 had disappeared from the private safe in the CEO's executive suite. Sandra's cleaning badge had been used to access the suite at 5:47 a.m. on the date of the theft. Her fingerprints were on the safe. The prosecution called it open and shut. Sandra said one thing to the detectives: "I clean that suite every morning. Of course my prints are on it." The detective nodded. He did not follow up. He was closing a case, not opening one. Her public defender was a man named Gareth Sinclair. 200 active cases. Dark circles that had become permanent. He reviewed the evidence packet on a 30-minute bus ride. He did not notice that the building's camera system showed Sandra's cleaning cart parked on the 39th floor at 5:47 a.m., not the 42nd. 3 floors away from the safe. The footage was in the discovery packet, page 53, Appendix D. But Gareth Sinclair had 200 cases. He was reading on a bus. His pen was running out of ink. Sometimes that is all it takes. Not malice, just volume and velocity. the ordinary inability to catch every detail when you are drowning. What Sandra did not know was that the necklace had been stolen by Frank Loomis, the CFO, the CEO's brother-in-law. Frank had been losing money at a private poker game in Fox Chapel for 18 months. He needed $300,000 in cash. He took the necklace. He used Sandra's badge code, which he had access to as CFO, to make it look like she opened the safe. He chose Sandra the way a predator chooses prey. Not because she was weak, because she was homeless, because she earned $11.60 an hour, because she could not afford a lawyer, because the system would process her without looking twice. Ethan was at school when they took her. He was 10 years old. He came back to the laundromat parking lot. The car was gone, towed as evidence.
The blanket, the thermos, the backpack he had left in the trunk, all of it, gone. He stood in the empty parking spot. The oil stain on the asphalt was still there. The shape of their life pressed into the ground like a fossil. A 10-year-old boy standing in an empty parking lot in March with his school polo and no coat and nowhere to go. He had nothing left. No home, no mother, no family. Nothing except a gold locket on a thin chain around his neck.
His mother had given it to him the week before. She said it was the only thing of value she owned. She said it had belonged to someone in her family. She did not say who. The locket had a chess knight engraved on the front. Inside, a faded photograph of a baby, and an inscription, "For my little knight, M.A." Sandra had told him to never take it off, never show it to anyone, and never, ever lose it. He did not understand why. Not yet.
Walter Kovacs lived in a row house on Braddock Avenue in Greenfield. He was 71 years old, retired steelworker, 34 years at the mill on the Monongahela before his knees gave out. The company gave him a watch and a pension. The watch was a cheap one. It still ticked. He still wore it. He kept his lawn perfect. Not good, perfect. Hand-trimmed edges, squared hedges, swept walkway every morning.
It was the lawn of a man who had learned that if you cannot control the large things, the mill closing, the cancer that took Eleanor, the accident that killed Tommy, you control the small things. He sat on the porch with coffee every morning at 6. He had not had a conversation longer than 4 minutes with anyone since Eleanor died 8 years ago. That was 3 years after their son Tommy died in a mill accident at 19. A crane cable snapped. The funeral was on a Wednesday.
Walter went back to work on Thursday. That is what men of his generation did. They buried their children. They went to work. They did not talk about it. The grief did not go away. It became the house they lived in. Walter had watched Sandra and Ethan from his porch for 2 years. He had seen them sleeping in the car behind the laundromat across the street. He had seen Sandra leave for work at 4 in the morning. He had seen Ethan walk to the bus stop in shoes that were too small.
He had never said anything. He was not a man who said things. When Child Protective Services came looking for Ethan the day after the arrest, Walter told them the boy was his grandson. He was not. He was a man who had lost his own son, who had been sitting on a porch alone for 8 years, who had watched this boy shiver in a school polo with no coat on a March evening, and had felt something crack inside a wall he had spent a decade building. "The boy stays with me," Walter said. Flat, final, not inviting discussion. The caseworker looked at the house. Clean, warm, food in the kitchen. She looked at Walter. 71, steady, clear-eyed. She had 14 more cases to visit that day. She checked a box. She moved on. Walter's house smelled like coffee and cast iron. The furniture was Eleanor's. A blue couch with a crocheted afghan. A recliner by the window. A kitchen table with 4 chairs. Only one had been used in 8 years. Photographs on the hallway wall turned face down. Walter could not look at them. He could not take them down. Turning them over was the compromise he had reached with grief. "You can have the room upstairs," Walter said. "It was my boy's." Ethan looked at him. "What happened to your boy?" Walter's jaw worked. His hand tightened on the coffee mug. 8 years of silence pressed against the back of his teeth. "He's gone," Walter said. "That's all." The spare room had a single bed with a blue quilt. A closet with 3 wire hangers. On the shelf, a box marked Tommy in black marker. Walter had not opened that box in 8 years, had not entered this room. 3 weeks after moving in, Ethan found a chess book in the basement. It was on a shelf next to old tax returns, wedged between a Western paperback and a coffee can full of screws. The pages were soft. The spine was cracked at the endgame section. Someone had spent a long time studying the part of the game where most people give up. Inside the front cover, in pencil, Tommy Kovacs, age 14. Ethan carried the book upstairs. Walter was in the kitchen. He saw the book. He went very still. The coffee overflowed his mug. He did not notice. He was looking at the book, seeing his son's hand holding it, his son alive and 14, learning chess from a library book because they could not afford lessons. His face did something complicated. Grief and surprise, and something like permission. A lock turning that had been rusted shut. He did not take the book away. "You play?" Walter asked. "No," Ethan said. "But I'm going to." Walter stood in the doorway, coffee running off the counter. The boy, at his dead son's table with his dead son's book. And Walter felt something crack that he had spent a decade keeping sealed. Not break, crack. The way ice cracks in spring. Thin, sharp, running through something frozen solid. He wiped up the coffee, poured a new cup, sat down across from Ethan, watched the boy study the board, moving pieces with careful deliberation, checking the book, moving them back, trying again. He did not say anything about Tommy, not then. He just sat there, let the boy have the book, felt the house change around him. Not warmer exactly, less empty, as if the rooms had been holding their breath for 8 years.
and had finally started to exhale. Ethan taught himself chess from Tommy's book in 6 weeks. No coach, no club, no computer at home. No one to play against except himself. He had a dead boy's book and the Greenfield Public Library and a fury that would not let him sleep. Not the loud kind, the kind that builds things. The cold, patient fury of a child who has watched the world take his mother, who has decided he is going to get her back. He studied the book the way soldiers study maps, memorized openings. The Sicilian Defense, the Queen's Gambit, the Ruy Lopez. Played through master games notation by notation. Played against himself, which is harder than it sounds. You have to forget what you know about one side to think clearly about the other. Ethan was good at forgetting, good at compartmentalizing, building walls inside his own head. A skill no 10-year-old should need, but children of incarcerated parents develop it out of necessity, the way plants grow toward light. Mrs. Cho at the Greenfield Library watched him beat the computer on its hardest setting by day 8. She set a cup of water beside his elbow. "You're beating it," she said. "I know," Ethan said. He did not look up. "There's chess in the park on Saturdays," she told him. "Shenley Park, the table's near the conservatory." She said it the way you tell someone about a door you think they are ready to walk through. The men in Shenley Park were not gentle. Retirees, off-duty bus drivers, a few college kids, and Ray, who had been playing park chess for 20 years and never lost a dollar he did not plan to lose. Dollar bills tucked under the clock, no mercy, no teaching, no handicaps. Ethan lost his first 3 games, fast, 12 moves, 15, 11. The regulars chuckled. One of them said, loud enough, kids should be home playing video games. Ethan did not respond. He walked home each time with his hands in his pockets, replayed the games from memory at Walter's kitchen table, found where he went wrong, built defenses. He won his 4th game. By the end of the month, the hustlers stopped playing him. Not out of kindness, they were losing money. A 10-year-old boy with bitten fingernails and a threadbare coat was taking their dollars. Ray watched Ethan demolish a visiting college player one Saturday. 23 moves. The college kid knocked his own king over and walked away. Ray shook his head, pulled a cigarette from behind his ear, studied the boy. "Kid," Ray said, "you need to play in the Aldrich Open. Big man himself plays the exhibition round. Rich guy, owns half the bridges in this city. Rated 2100. Ethan did not respond, but he looked up when Ray said the name, Aldrich, the name on the building where his mother had cleaned for 9 years, the name on the arrest report. The name. That was the reason he was sleeping in a dead boy's room instead of a rusted car with a blanket and a thermos. He filed it away, the way a chess player files away a weakness in an opponent's position. Not acting on it, noting it, holding it, waiting. That night, Ethan stayed up until 2 in the morning, the kitchen dark except for the single lamp, shadows long. The only sounds were turning pages and clicking pieces and the clock on the wall. Walter came down at midnight for water, saw the boy hunched over the board, face in the cone of lamplight, eyes tracking lines of attack across 64 squares. Walter stood in the hallway a long time, watched the boy move a piece, studied the result, nod, reset, try a different line. The concentration was total. Walter recognized it, the same quality Tommy had. The ability to disappear into a problem so completely the rest of the world ceased to exist. He went back to bed, lay in the dark, listened to the faint clicking of chess pieces downstairs. This boy is not studying chess anymore, he thought. He is building a weapon. Sandra's case ground forward the way the system grinds, slowly, indifferently, with the weight of a machine that does not distinguish between the guilty and the people who cannot afford to prove otherwise. Her public defender missed a filing deadline in June. Key discovery requests went unanswered. The prosecution's case was built on Sandra's cleaning badge and her fingerprints on the safe. A clean digital trail. Precise. Manufactured. Frank Loomis had spent 2 weeks constructing that trail, sitting in his corner office after hours, using Sandra's badge code to create a false entry log, planting the fingerprint evidence by handling the safe with Sandra's cleaning gloves, which she left in her locker every night. He needed someone the system would process without looking twice. He chose Sandra for another reason too, a reason that had nothing to do with poker debts and everything to do with a 26-year-old secret. But that reason was still buried. For now. The trial was short. 3 character witnesses said Sandra was honest. An IT forensics consultant said the badge log showed Sandra accessed the executive suite at the time of the theft. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. 8 to 15 years. Sandra stood in the courtroom, hands clasped, face still. She was thinking about Ethan, whether Walter had picked him up from school, whether he had eaten dinner, whether he was sitting at that kitchen table with the chess book again. 8 to 15 years. Ethan would be 18 before she got out, maybe 23. He would grow up without her. At the jail visit, Sandra told Ethan through the glass that it did not go well. "They're saying I took the necklace, baby." Her voice was steady. Her hands were shaking. "My lawyer, he's got too many cases. I don't think he really looked at the evidence." Ethan pressed his hand to the glass. Sandra pressed hers against the other side. Cold, thick, the closest they had been in months. "How much time?" he asked. Sandra hesitated. 1 breath, 2. 8 to 15 years. The locket swung forward as Ethan leaned toward the glass. Sandra's eyes went to it. She reached up, pressed her fingertips to the divider right where the locket rested on his side. "You're still wearing it," she said. Her voice cracked for the first time. "You told me never to take it off." "I did," she swallowed. "Ethan, listen to me. That locket, it's more important than you know. It belonged to someone connected to that company. I found it in the suite the first year I worked there, behind a radiator, like someone had hidden it." "Whose was it?" Sandra shook her head. "I don't know, but the initials inside, M.A. I asked around when I first found it.
One of the old security guards told me to stop asking. Told me some doors are better left shut. I kept it because... She stopped, looked at the glass, at the fluorescent light, at the walls. Because nobody else wanted it, she said. And it felt like it belonged to someone who was lost. Ethan walked out of the jail, sat on the bus stop bench for 40 minutes. The bench was cold. The jail rose behind him like a cliff face. He sat there with his fists on his knees and the number 815 echoing in his head like a bell. He was done waiting for adults. Adults had broken this. The detective who did not follow up, the lawyer with 200 cases, the judge who saw a badge log and not a person. Every single adult in the chain had failed. Not because they were malicious, because the system is not built for people like Sandra Weber. It processes bodies. It does not find truth. Walter pulled the truck alongside the curb. He did not ask how it went. The boy's face told him everything. That night, Ethan stayed up until 2. The chess book was open to the section on queen sacrifices. A school worksheet sat untouched beside it. Long division, the kind of homework that belongs to childhoods Ethan no longer had. He was not playing a game anymore. He was making a plan, because somebody had to, because the lawyer was not going to, because the judge was not going to, because nobody in that courthouse, or that office, or that boardroom was going to look at the evidence and say, "Wait, a 10-year-old boy at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, studying how to sacrifice a queen? A gold locket beside the board catching lamplight? And 40 floors above the Allegheny River, the man who could have ended this with one phone call was pouring himself a scotch, reading the sports section, not thinking about Sandra Weber at all. But that was about to change. Dolores Pruitt lived across the street from Walter. She was 67, retired paralegal, 31 years at a downtown firm before the bad hip and the pension and the restlessness of a woman who had spent 3 decades finding things other people missed. She still had her instincts, her public library research access, a highlighter in her cardigan pocket at all times, and the memory of losing her own daughter to a rigged custody ruling 30 years ago. A wound that never closed. A scar that throbbed every time she saw the system chew up someone who could not fight back. She knocked on Walter's door on a Tuesday morning, manila folder under her arm. "I filed a public records request 2 months ago," Dolores said. She spread printouts across Walter's kitchen table. The security footage from Aldrich Industries the night of the theft. Sandra's cleaning cart was on the 39th floor at 5:47 a.m. The safe is on the 42nd floor. She was 3 floors away. Walter stared at the printouts. The timestamps were clear. The highlighter marks were precise. Why didn't her lawyer catch this? Walter asked. Dolores set her reading glasses on the table. Because he had 200 cases, and because nobody fights for people who can't afford to fight for themselves. But Dolores had found something else, something she had not expected. "Walter, come look at this." She tapped a printout. A grainy still from the security camera. The executive suite hallway. 5:52 a.m.
5 minutes after Sandra's badge was supposedly used. The image showed a man entering the suite, not Sandra. A man in a suit. The angle was bad, the resolution was poor, but the build was unmistakable. "That's the CFO," Dolores said. "Frank Loomis. He was in the building that morning, at that hour, on the executive floor, 5 minutes after the badge swipe he blamed on Sandra." Walter leaned in.
So he used her badge code? He had access to every badge code in the building. He's the CFO. Dolores tapped the image. "But that's not what made me call you over here." She pulled out another printout. This one was not from the building security system. It was a newspaper clipping. Old. Yellowed. 26 years old. The headline read, "Aldrich Heiress Vanishes. Foul play not ruled out." The article was about Margaret Aldrich Loomis, Richard Aldrich's only daughter. She had married Frank Loomis at 23. She disappeared 3 years later. No body was found. No arrest was made. The case went cold. The photograph in the article showed a young woman with dark brown hair and hazel eyes. Dolores placed the article next to a printout of Sandra's jail booking photo. Dark brown hair, hazel eyes. The resemblance was not exact, but it was there, in the jawline, in the set of the eyes. "Now look at this," Dolores said. She pulled out the final document, a birth certificate. Margaret Aldrich Loomis had given birth to a son 3 months before she disappeared. The birth certificate listed the father as Frank Loomis. The child's name was never recorded. The birth was registered at a county hospital 40 miles outside Pittsburgh. The child disappeared with the mother, Dolores said. Richard Aldrich spent 5 years looking for his daughter and his grandchild. He hired private investigators. He offered a reward. Nothing. Walter was very still. "You think Sandra?" "I don't think Sandra is Margaret," Dolores said. "Margaret would be 52 today. Sandra is 36. I think Ethan is Margaret's child." Walter sat down heavily. The chair creaked under him. "The timing works," Dolores said. "Margaret disappeared 26 years ago with a baby boy. Sandra told the social worker she was raised in foster care. No birth parents, no family history. She told Walter she found the locket in the executive suite. But what if she didn't find it? What if someone gave it to her? Who? The same person who gave her the baby. 26 years ago, before Margaret vanished. Ethan was in the next room, playing through positions on the magnetic board, not looking up, but hearing every word. He reached up and touched the locket at his collar, ran his thumb over the engraved chess knight. "For my little knight, M.A.
Margaret Aldrich." He did not say anything, but his hands were shaking. And the next piece he moved on the board, the knight. He moved with a precision that had nothing to do with chess. If Richard Aldrich finds out that boy is his grandson, Dolores said quietly, everything changes. Walter looked through the doorway at Ethan, at the locket, at the boy who had come to his door with nothing. Everything already changed, Walter said.
The Aldrich Industries annual charity gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the William Penn Hotel on a Saturday in October. Crystal chandeliers, 300 guests in tuxedos and evening gowns, champagne towers, a silent auction for things normal people could not afford. The centerpiece was the chess exhibition. Richard Aldrich played 3 simultaneous games against local club players. It was theater. It was branding. Richard Aldrich showing the city he was not just rich.
He was smart. Richard did love chess. He had learned from his father in a machine shop in Homewood 50 years ago, playing on a board balanced on a metal lathe between shifts. He played every day, rated 2100. Not a grandmaster, but strong enough that club players approached with genuine nervousness. He had taught Margaret to play, before she married Frank, before she disappeared. She had been good, better than good. She had a gift for endgames.
Foreseeing the board stripped down to essentials, Richard kept a photograph of her in his wallet, sitting across from him at a chessboard. She was 12 in the picture. She was smiling. He had not seen her in 26 years. Ethan wore a blazer from Walter's closet. Tommy's blazer. The sleeves hung past his wrists by 4 inches. The shoulders sagged. It smelled of cedar and mothballs, and the sadness of clothes waiting for someone who is not coming back.
He took the 71A bus downtown, the same bus his mother had taken for 9 years. Walked through the hotel lobby like he had somewhere to be. Told the guard he was there with his grandfather. Nobody stopped him. He was small. He was quiet. Nobody expects a 10-year-old to be dangerous. He waited. Watched Richard Aldrich win all 3 exhibition games. The crowd applauded. Champagne refilled. Speeches. Toasts.
The self-congratulatory warmth of wealthy people celebrating their own generosity. Then Ethan walked to the exhibition table, pulled out the empty chair, climbed up onto it. He stood on the chair, eye level with the standing adults. Conversations died in widening circles like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. A security guard stepped forward, then another. 2 men, each one over 6 feet, 220 pounds. The first guard grabbed Ethan's arm, hard. The boy's feet lifted off the chair. "Let go of me," Ethan said. The second guard grabbed his other arm. They lifted him. His feet dangled above the ballroom floor. His shoes, scuffed, too small, the shoes of a homeless boy, swung 6 inches above the ground. "My name is Ethan Weber," he shouted. His voice carried across the ballroom, clear, unbroken. "My mom is Sandra Weber. She cleaned your floors for 9 years. She never stole anything. You let them put her in jail for something she didn't do." The guards were carrying him toward the exit. His feet never touched the floor. His blazer rode up. The locket swung free from his collar. Gold, tarnished, catching the chandelier light. 200 faces watched a child being carried through a ballroom by men 4 times his size. A woman near the back held up her phone and started recording. Frank Loomis, standing at the bar, had gone the color of wet cement. His hand tightened on his bourbon glass until the knuckles were white. Richard Aldrich's chief counsel leaned in. "Don't engage. Security will handle it." But Richard was not listening. He was staring at the locket, the gold locket swinging from the boy's neck as the guards carried him toward the door. a chess knight engraved on the front. He knew that locket.
He had given it to Margaret on her 12th birthday, the day he taught her the knight's move, the day she beat him for the first time. He had the matching piece in the safe in his study at home. 2 knights, one for him, one for her. He had not seen the other knight in 26 years. "Wait," Richard said. His voice was quiet. Nobody heard him. "Stop!" Richard's voice erupted across the ballroom. The voice of a man who had spent 68 years being in command. The guards froze.
Every person in the room froze. Richard pushed through the crowd. 3 steps. 4. 5. He stopped in front of the guards holding the boy. His chest was heaving. His hands were shaking. He reached out. Not toward Ethan's face. Toward the locket. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely a whisper now. Ethan, still suspended between the 2 guards, looked down at the old man's trembling hand. "My mother gave it to me." "Your mother?" Richard's voice cracked.
What is her name? Sandra Weber. She cleaned your building for 9 years, and you let them frame her. Richard was not listening. His fingers were touching the locket, the chess knight, the engraving. His eyes were filling with water. 68 years old, $3 billion, 300 guests watching, and tears running down the face of the most powerful man in Pittsburgh. "Put the boy down," Richard said. "Put him down. Now." The guard set Ethan on the floor. His feet touched the marble. He straightened his blazer, looked up at the billionaire who was holding his locket and weeping. "If you want it back," Ethan said, "beat me at chess." Richard Aldrich stood in the middle of his own charity gala, with tears on his face and a dead daughter's locket in his fingers, and looked into a 10-year-old's eyes that were the exact shade of hazel his Margaret's had been. Frank Loomis set his bourbon glass on the bar. Walked to the nearest exit, took out his phone, and started making calls. "1 game," Ethan said. "If I win, you look at the evidence. You clear my mother's name." Richard nodded. He could not speak. He was looking at the boy's eyes, Margaret's eyes. "Tomorrow," Richard said. His voice was raw. "My boardroom, 10 o'clock.
Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. The 40th floor of the Aldrich Industries Tower. The boardroom was glass on 3 sides. Through the windows, the Allegheny and the Monongahela converged below in the gray October light. The point, where the rivers become one, where Pittsburgh begins. A chessboard sat on the mahogany conference table. Tournament weight pieces. A digital clock. Water in a glass pitcher. Nothing else. Richard Aldrich was already seated. He had removed his jacket. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. He looked like a man who had not slept. On the table beside him, a photograph in a silver frame. A girl, 12 years old, sitting at a chessboard, smiling. Margaret. Walter, Dolores, and Ethan arrived together. Dolores carried the manila folder. Walter carried himself the way he always did. Granite. Unhurried. Ethan climbed into the executive chair. His feet did not touch the floor. The chair was enormous, designed for men who weighed 200 pounds. The boy looked absurd in it, but his face was not absurd. He placed his hands flat on the table, the locket on its chain beside his right hand. He looked at the board, then at Richard. "White or black?" Richard asked. "You choose," Ethan said. Richard turned the board so white was in front of Ethan, giving the boy the first move. A courtesy, a test. Ethan opened with e4, the king's pawn, the most common first move in chess history. But the way he placed it told Richard something. This boy had not come to be interesting. He had come to win. Richard responded with e5, the classical response. Two pawns facing each other. Everything equal. Everything ahead. Before they began, Richard spoke. His voice was measured, careful. "The locket," he said. "You know whose it was." "M.A.," Ethan said. "Margaret Aldrich." Richard closed his eyes. One breath. Two. When he opened them, they were red. "My daughter," Richard said. "She disappeared 26 years ago, 3 months after her son was born. She married Frank. She was unhappy. She wanted to leave. And then she was gone." "What happened to the baby?" Ethan asked. "I don't know." Richard's voice was barely audible. "I looked for 5 years. Spent everything I had. Nothing. Frank told me she ran off. He told me to let it go." Richard looked at the framed photograph of Margaret, then at Ethan, at his eyes. "He told me a lot of things." They played for 90 minutes. The game was not fast, not flashy, deep and slow and suffocating. The way a python kills. Not with violence, with pressure, incremental, inexorable. Each move closing off another escape route. Richard played beautifully. 60 years of study, thousands of games against strong opponents. He was not playing down to the boy. He was playing his best chess. But Ethan's chess was something else.
The chess of someone who learned from a dead boy's book in a basement, who tested it against park hustlers, who refined it against a library computer night after night while his mother sat behind glass 40 minutes away by bus. Chess without fear. Chess without ego. Chess willing to sacrifice anything if the sacrifice served the larger plan. At the 40-minute mark, Richard's phone buzzed, a text from Frank. "End this now. The kid is nobody." Richard read the text.
Put the phone face down. Made his next move. At the 60-minute mark, Ethan sacrificed his queen. Richard leaned back, stared at the board for 5 full minutes. The queen, the most powerful piece. And this 10-year-old had given it away. The sacrifice opened a forced sequence, a cascade of captures and checks leading to checkmate in 11 moves. The kind of move grandmasters study in textbooks. the kind that requires seeing 14 moves ahead, each one triggering the next, each one inevitable. Richard counted, recounted, traced the lines with his eyes. Every line led to the same place. Checkmate. Unavoidable. He sat back, looked at the boy. "You saw this 12 moves ago," Richard said. 14, Ethan said. Richard reached forward, tipped his king with 2 fingers. The king fell sideways. A soft click of wood on wood. The sound of a verdict being overturned. Ethan did not celebrate.
He sat very still with his hands in his lap, looked at the fallen king, thought about his mother's hands on the glass. The room was quiet a long time. The rivers moved below. Then Richard picked up the silver-framed photograph of Margaret, held it beside Ethan's face. The same hazel eyes, the same set of the jaw, the same sharp chin. "She beat me when she was 12, Richard said. His voice was broken. Same opening, same sacrifice, the same night sacrifice on F3. He looked at the fallen king, then at the boy. "You have her gift." He set the photograph down, picked up the locket, opened it. Inside, the faded photograph of a baby. His grandson. His missing grandson. "Show me the evidence," Richard said. Dolores slid the manila folder across the mahogany. Richard read every page. The security footage showing Sandra's cart on the wrong floor. The timestamp discrepancy. The grainy image of Frank entering the executive suite 5 minutes after the fake badge swipe. The newspaper clipping about Margaret's disappearance. The birth certificate. Page by page, line by line. His hand developed a fine tremor. The same tremor Walter had noticed in Sandra's hands through the visitation glass. The tremor of a person confronting a truth they have been avoiding. He picked up his phone. Not the corporate legal team. Not the board. Not Frank. His personal attorney, a man named David Reinhardt. "I need you at my office. Bring a notary. I'm making a statement about the Sandra Weber case. And contact the district attorney." He hung up, looked at the folder, at the fallen king, at Ethan. "I knew," Richard said, barely a whisper. "Not the details, not the footage, but I knew something was wrong with Frank. He changed after Margaret disappeared. He became careful in a way that had nothing to do with business. And when Sandra was arrested, he was the one who pushed for prosecution. He was insistent. He wanted it done fast. No investigation, just prosecution." "Why?" Ethan asked. Richard's eyes went to the locket. "Because Sandra had the locket. The locket I gave Margaret. If anyone in that building recognized it, if I recognized it." He stopped, swallowed. "Frank didn't just steal the necklace," Richard said. "He framed Sandra because she was getting close to the truth without knowing it. She had the locket. She was wearing it around the building. One of the old security guards noticed. He told Frank, and Frank panicked." Walter's jaw tightened. He framed a homeless woman to protect himself. "He framed a homeless woman to keep me from finding my grandson," Richard's voice was steel. "He has known where Margaret went. He has known for 26 years, and he buried it." What happened next took 3 weeks, but it started in that boardroom. Richard provided internal audit records, email logs, and safe access codes showing the theft was initiated from Frank's personal terminal. The diamond necklace was found in a safety deposit box registered to a shell company Frank controlled. The digital trail that led to Sandra had been manufactured by a man who knew the system. But the bigger revelation was what the private investigators found when Richard turned them loose on Frank's records. Margaret Aldrich Loomis had not run away. She had tried to leave Frank. She had found evidence of his early embezzlement. She confronted him. He threatened her, told her if she left, he would destroy her father's company. She packed a bag in the middle of the night, took the baby, left everything behind except the locket. She had driven south, changed her name, changed the baby's name, raised the child in foster care in West Virginia because she was too afraid of Frank to keep the baby herself. She left the locket with the child, the only piece of her identity she dared to leave behind. Sandra Weber had been adopted from that foster home at age 4. The locket came with her. Nobody told her what it meant. Nobody knew. Margaret Aldrich Loomis had died in a car accident in West Virginia 6 months after leaving the baby. She was 26 years old. Frank knew. He had known for 26 years, and he had never told Richard. Frank Loomis was arrested at his home in Fox Chapel on a Wednesday at 6:15 a.m. 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage. Swimming pool covered for winter. The detectives knocked. Frank answered in a bathrobe. His wife stood behind him on the stairs. He did not go quietly. He shouted, kicked a chair across the foyer, tried to push past the detective in the doorway. The second detective put him on the floor, face down on the marble, handcuffs clicking shut. The same sound Sandra had heard 9 months ago on a different floor in a different building. His wife stood on the stairs and watched and did not say a word. The same silence Sandra's coworkers had kept. The silence people keep when the world rearranges itself, and they do not know what to say. Sandra Miller's conviction was vacated. The hearing was 12 minutes. The judge removed his glasses, pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. "The court owes you an apology," the judge said. 6 words. Sandra stood in the courtroom in the gray cleaning uniform they gave back to her. Thinner now, hair different. She heard those words and did not react. Not at first. She had been inside so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to have the system work in her direction. She walked out of the county jail on a Thursday in November. Same clothes they arrested her in. Thinner, older, but walking and free. Richard Aldrich drove her home in a car that cost more than Sandra had earned in 9 years of cleaning his building. He did not speak for most of the drive. He was looking at Sandra, at her dark brown hair, at her hazel eyes, at the way she held herself, careful, ready for the ground to open. "You look like her," Richard said quietly. "Like Margaret." Sandra turned to him. "She was your daughter." "She was." He looked at the road. "And the boy, Ethan. He's my grandson. I've been looking for him for 26 years. Sandra was quiet a long time. "I didn't know."
she said. I grew up in foster care. Nobody told me anything. I just had the locket. I know, Richard said. None of this was your fault. None of it. They pulled onto Braddock Avenue. Ethan was on Walter's porch. He saw her. She was walking up the sidewalk, carrying a plastic bag with everything she owned. Thinner. Hair different. But his mother. Ethan did not run at first.
He stood up from the porch step, walked down. 1 step, 2, 3. Careful, deliberate. A boy who had learned not to rush, who had learned hope is a thing that can be taken away. Then he was off the steps. Then he was running. She was running. They met in the middle of the sidewalk. She dropped the bag, picked him up even though he was too big. He let her. Some things you let happen when you have been strong for a very long time, and the strength was never yours to carry.
The locket pressed between them, gold and warm.
Walter watched from his living room window. His hand was on the glass, cold. November light at the low angle it gets in late autumn. Everything golden and precise and temporary. Shadows long, air sharp. The quality of clarity that comes just before winter closes in. He watched Sandra hold her son on the sidewalk, the boy's arms around her neck, her face in his hair, mother and son, the oldest geometry in the world. He watched the neighbors come out on their porches, one by one, the way people do when something happens on the block that matters. The woman from 3 doors down, the old man with the dog. They came out. They stood. They did not say anything. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone else's joy is witness it and be quiet. He watched Dolores on her porch, coffee mug raised in his direction, a toast, a salute. The gesture of a woman who knew what she had done, and what Walter had done, and what the boy had done.
And who understood none of them would ever talk about it. Walter nodded. He did not go outside. He stood at the window, watched from the inside, the way he had watched most of the last 8 years. Through glass, at a distance. But the distance felt different now. Not isolation, respect. Giving 2 people space to find each other. He thought about Tommy, the chess book with the pencil inscription, Tommy Kovacs, age 14. That book lived on Ethan's nightstand now.
In the room that used to be Tommy's. He thought about the morning he came downstairs and found Ethan at the table with the board set up. Standing in the doorway with his coffee, feeling the house not empty for the first time in years. He never said it out loud what Ethan meant to him. Walter was not a man who said things like that. He showed it in cast iron and coffee, in driving to the jail on Saturday mornings, sitting in the truck in the parking lot with a Western paperback while the boy went inside, being there when he came out. Every time, without fail, without asking, just present, the way a house is present, not asking anything, just there. Richard Aldrich did not ask for custody. He did not ask for anything. He sat in Walter's kitchen 3 days later, drinking Walter's coffee, which was better than anything his personal chef made. Looking at the photographs on the hallway wall that Walter had finally turned face up. I want to set up a trust for the boy, Richard said. Education, medical,
whatever he needs. Walter set his mug down. He doesn't need your money. He needs a home. He has one, Richard said. This one. I'm not trying to take him, Richard said. I lost my daughter. I don't want to lose her son by trying to own him. I just want to be... He stopped. Searched for the word. A billionaire who could buy anything, searching for a word he could not purchase. Present, Walter said. Richard looked at him. Yes, that's the only thing that matters. Walter picked up his mug. You can come for dinner on Sundays. I make a pot roast. 3 months later, Sandra sat in the spectator row at Ethan's first-rated chess tournament. The Pittsburgh City Open. Community center basement. Fluorescent lights. Folding tables. Burned coffee. She had a new job. Office manager at a law firm downtown. The partners knew her story. They hired her on a Monday. She had not missed a day since. She took the 71A. Different stop, same thermos. Walter drove Ethan to the tournament. They did not talk much. Ethan had the magnetic board on his lap, running through positions the way a musician runs scales. At registration, the coordinator looked at his form. You don't have a coach listed. Ethan looked at Walter. Walter looked at the coordinator. Put my name down, Walter said. Kovacs, Kovacs. He did not know the difference between a bishop and a knight. He did not know what a rating was. He knew that when a boy needs someone to write a name on a form, you write it. When a child who is not yours, but who sleeps in your dead son's bed and reads your dead son's book, looks up at you and needs you to be something, a grandfather, a coach, a person who stays. You are that thing. Richard Aldrich stood near the doorway, watching, not intruding. He had learned something in that boardroom, the same thing a 10-year-old had taught him with a queen's sacrifice. Sometimes the strongest move is the one where you give up your most powerful piece. Sandra watched her son play chess in a basement under fluorescent lights. She thought about the 14 months behind glass, pressing her hand to a divider, telling him everything was fine when nothing was fine. She had the answer now. The answer to the question she had asked herself on that metal bunk. Who was going to take care of her boy? It was sitting in a metal folding chair, arms crossed, flannel jacket zipped, a face like carved stone, watching her son the way a mountain watches a valley, with the quiet permanence of something that has decided to stay. And 2 chairs down, a billionaire who had lost a daughter and found a grandson was sitting in the same kind of folding chair. No tailored suit today, just a jacket and slacks. The same posture as Walter, arms crossed, watching. 2 old men who had both lost children, sitting side by side on metal chairs in a basement, finding something they had stopped believing they would find. The locket was around Sandra's neck now. Ethan had given it back to her the day she came home. She had put it on. She would not take it off. You know that feeling. When something lost comes back. Not the way it was. Different. Smaller. Maybe. Or bigger. But back. In your hands again. Warm against your chest. Across the table, a man twice Ethan's size studied the board, made his move,
leaned back with the slow recognition that he was about to lose to a child. Ethan moved his knight. The man stared, then tipped his king. The sound it made, that soft click of wood on wood. Not the sound of victory, the sound of a door opening, the sound of something beginning.
14 months. That is how long Sandra Weber spent behind glass, framed by a man who chose her because she was homeless and could not fight, because she had a locket that connected a 10-year-old boy to a billionaire grandfather nobody knew about, because one man's greed and one man's silence cost a woman 14 months of her life, and a boy 14 months of his childhood. The system failed at every level. The police who did not follow up.
The public defender with 200 cases. The jury who saw a badge log instead of a person. The system processed Sandra the way a machine processes raw material. Mechanically, without curiosity or conscience. What set her free was a 10-year-old boy with a dead boy's chess book, a retired steelworker who opened his door, a retired paralegal who still had her instincts, a gold locket with a chess knight engraved on the front, and a baby's photograph inside.
I keep thinking about Walter Kovacs, about the morning he stood in the kitchen doorway, saw Ethan with Tommy's book, and did not take it away. That was the moment. Not the gala, not the match, not the queen's sacrifice. The moment that mattered was a 71-year-old man deciding that grief does not have to be the last thing he is useful for. That a house does not have to stay empty just because the person it was built for is gone.
Richard Aldrich stepped down as CEO 6 months later. Frank Loomis was convicted. 12 years. The judge said, "You didn't just steal a necklace. You stole a woman's freedom. You stole a child's mother, and you buried a grandfather's grandson for 26 years." Sandra filed a civil suit. Settle dive court. The neighbors on Braddock Avenue could guess the amount from the new roof. And the fact that Sandra's car was no longer a rusted sedan, but something that started every time you turned the key. But those are facts. This is not a story about facts. This is a story about a boy who stood on a chair. If this story moved you, if you know what it feels like to watch someone you love get ground down by a system that was not built for them, if you have been a Walter and opened your door when you did not have to, if you have been a Dolores and kept digging when everyone else stopped, leave a comment. Tell us about it. We read every single one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Not tomorrow, today. Somewhere right now, there is a Sandra behind glass. There is an Ethan at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning. There is a Walter standing in a doorway, deciding whether to open up. And subscribe so you do not miss the next story. There are more Ethans out there, more Walters, more Doloreses with manila folders and highlighters and the stubborn belief that truth matters. Walter Kovacs does not know anything about chess. He knows that when a boy shows up on your porch with nowhere to go, you open the door. He knows that when a book with your dead son's name ends up in someone else's hands, you let it. He knows that some things are not yours to claim. They are yours to witness. That is the whole secret, friends. Knowing when to stop. And open the door.